Okay, this is mine. Try and take it reasonably fast because there's a lot of slides. One thing I found when I was putting the slides together was this topic's huge. It's ridiculously huge, and it's really hard to cover enough to give you a grounding without going into detail. And you could easily spend a full lecture on any one of the slides that you're going to see in here. Trying to keep it reasonably easy so I don't melt anybody's brain, especially my own, because I'm not an encryption expert. Hand up, I am absolutely not an encryption expert. I just found the topic quite interesting. So. Who am I? It's me. PHP Belfast is myself and Andy and Dave. I am Faffy Man on Twitter. You probably don't want to follow me. I don't tweet a lot of work-related stuff. It's mostly personal bullshit. And I work for an advertising company for my roles. So yeah, the talk's going to be mostly about the whys, the hows, not an awful lot of the theory, the maths, the probability. We'll touch on it a little bit, just enough to give it a mention, but I'm going to try and steer clear of that. Probability theory is a lot of the stuff that you see when you study encryption looks like this in the bottom, and that's one of the more simplistic definitions. It gets a lot more complicated than that. So, why do we encrypt stuff? Secure communication is probably the number one reason, and it's why encryption was invented, for sending information between two states. TLS email, SSL, HTTPS on the web, very common. Your file systems, so your DVDs, which has got shit encryption. Memory cards, online voting apps, web, pretty poor encryption example too. Payment gateways, your credit cards, bitcoins, a little bit more new and relevant. Your cable TV, Skype, DRM, all those things all involve cryptography and encryption. So it's not just about storing passwords. So, what is encryption? Anybody know what that says? All great to me. And why? Essentially, encryption is just about encoding stuff so that your enemy, another person, can't understand it or can't read it. So if none of us spoke Greek, that would be great, apart from we could go and use Google Translate pretty quick. But realistically, it's just about taking a single message and turning it into a form that an unknown person can't read, only you and whoever the intended recipient is can read it. Generally speaking, most of the time, not always true. What about ciphers? Ciphers are a pair of algorithms, and it's basically whatever you encrypt, you can decrypt to get back to the original. Generally speaking, not always true. So some historical examples. The Caesar cipher. It's a shift cipher or a substitution cipher. The name's a bit of a giveaway. It was invented Roman times. I'll give you a quick example. So really, in this example, the alphabet shifts 3 places. So you see the A becomes an X, the B becomes a Y, C becomes a Z. And there's an example of it in use here. So using the standard alphabet, 26 letters, that gives you 26 factorial, which is 2 to the power of 88. So 88 bits of encryption, which may not sound too bad, but because it's just a shift cipher, it's really insecure, really easy to crack. An A will always be an X, a B will always be a Y. That's not really good enough. The Vineyard cipher, 16th century one, coming forward a wee bit. So that's a modulo shift cipher. It's a little bit similar on the face of it, but not quite, because, we'll see. PHP Belfast encryption talk is our plain text. We've used Blink Studios as our key. So the key just repeats over and over and over again, Blink Studios, Blink Studios, Blink Studios, until we get to the end. Now what we do is, if you imagine each letter of the alphabet having a number, like A is 1, B is 2, if you add the 2 numbers together, what does that number become in the alphabet? Well, 16 for P, B for 2, it's 18. The 18th letter of the alphabet is R. And you carry that through. Now what you'll see then is a P here came from a B, but a P here came from an E. So the same letters don't always map to the same output, which is better than the shift cipher, but yeah, it's still not great. The Playfair cipher, again, is another very, very famous ciphering system. Mr. Kennedy, because he's the reason it's most famous, World War II, Kennedy's PT boat incident, the messages that were sent calling for help were sent using the Playfair cipher. How the Playfair cipher works is you take the alphabet and you write it in a 25 letter grid, 5 by 5 grid. The letter J is dropped so that you get from 26 down to 25 letters. You start the grid with a little keyword of your own, so I've used PHP Belfast, so PH, well I've already used P so I can't have it again, BELFAST, and then you continue the alphabet on. So what you do is you break your message up into 2-letter pairs. So we have an I and an N, and you draw a rectangle around those 2 letters at the opposite corners. So the I, we shift it over to where the N is, and it's a D, so I maps to D. The N, we shift over to where the I was, and that's a Q, so N maps to Q. And you carry that on the whole way through, and that's how you get your encryption message. In order to decrypt that, then someone just needs to know what your initial keyword was. Again, it's got very low level of security. Kennedy probably could have been killed had a Japanese radio officer paid attention to the radio traffic on that day, because they gave away their exact position of where they were, what island they were on, what time they wanted picked up. The one-time pad, 1917, predating the war, proven to be semantically secure. It's very, very fast to encode, very, very fast to decode, because it's essentially a stream cipher. The one-time pad then is just a very long random string, completely as random as you can get. That's the exact same length as the message. Now, it carries some inherent problems in that it's very big. Your key is enormous. And how do you send the key to the person who wants to decrypt the message? That's as much trouble as sending the actual message. There's also a problem in that the number of available keys in the world is probably not as good as the number of potential messages, because you're going to start getting repeated sequences. So the one-time pad is only good if you choose one time. If you get repeating sequences, you're in trouble. Rotor machines sought to improve upon the problem of what you get in maps to the same letter out. So the most famous rotor machines, and the photo on the front is one of them, was the Enigma. Tony was also quite a famous one, and if you do any looking into the history of World War II and Bletchley Park, Tony is where a lot of the maths and cracking started. They can still be broken. If you know a little bit about the plain text message that was being encrypted, you can now figure out how the machines were set up, and it's all about little rotors that shift positions as each letter gets typed. Now, if you know the initial setting for the rotors, and you know a little bit of the plain text, you can crack the machine. They had different setups each day. So during the war, there was a soldier in Rommel's army in the desert who consistently sent the message every day, nothing to report. And once the Brits knew that there was nothing to report, they could see his message, they'd see that cipher, and they were able to decrypt that one pretty quickly and use that key to decrypt all the other messages for that coming day. And all they did was look out for this one guy's message, after they did the initial hard work of figuring out what the encryption system was and how the machines were set up. Also helps you can steal the machine. So encryption, it's all about XORing, exclusive OR. That is pretty much true. It's a bit of an in-joke with encryption apparently, and I'm sure it's not humorous. So XORing being 0 and 1 always maps to a 1, a 1 to 0 to a 1, a 1 and a 1 inverts to a 0. You translate your plain text, your ASCII text, through hex or into binary, and then you can carry out these XOR operations. You see there, if that's our plain message and this is our key, you get this cipher text, this encryption text out. If you apply this same key to it and XOR it again, you get back to the original. A lot a lot of hacking attempts will involve trying to get bits of the key and XORing against a known message, known ciphertext attacks or known plaintext attacks. So symmetric ciphers is when we had the summary at the start about the cipher where whatever you can encrypt, you can decrypt. So if we encrypt a message with a key, we can apply the same key to a decrypt algorithm to get back to a plain message. The key to a good symmetric cipher is that two identical inputs, like the roller machines, give you two different outputs. Once you start getting the same output for the same input, your code's going to get cracked pretty quickly. So how do you make it practical to encrypt and decrypt whenever everything changes each time you send a message? There's two ways, two main systems of enciphering. The stream ciphers, of which the one-time pad is a stream cipher, and the block ciphers. This is where you start getting a wee bit more complicated. Stream ciphers will use a small key. They don't have to be the long key that the one-time pad was, but you'll use a generator function to expand that key to be the length of the message that's required. Use a pseudo-random function to do that. Stream ciphers, they're very, very fast. They're very commonly used by hardware systems, so DVD players, GSM phones, Bluetooth, they all use stream ciphers. RC4, you might recognise, is one of the more common older stream ciphers. DVD encryption uses a stream cipher. Yeah. So what you hear a lot is about pseudo-randomness. Of course, there's no such thing as true random, but pseudo-random is all about getting as close as you can to it. The PRF is a pseudo-random function. PRG, pseudo-random generator. Pseudo-random generator will make use of pseudo-random functions. The PRP is a pseudo-random permutation. Where you see PRP, it's talking about block ciphers. So that's AES, triple S. PRG, then it's more likely to be your stream ciphers. Pseudo-random keys and the pseudo-random functions is all about creating a relatively short key and having that expand into a long key so that you don't have to have an actual encryption key that's the same length as your message. It all gets expanded pseudo-random. So DES, some of the more well-known encryption standards, DES, invented in 1970 and submitted to be a federal standard in 1976. It's IBM's Lucifer system. It actually stood until 1997, so 20 years that was considered to be pretty much uncrackable. And it was broken by exhaustive search or brute force. It took 3 months to break it. Several other people took the challenge on trying to break it. In 1998, it was broken in 3 days, but at a cost of $250,000. There's very few people that could really put the time and effort into doing that. 1999, it was broken in 22 hours. Another outfit did it in 1999 or 2000 in 7 days at a much lower cost, but they used a botnet of thousands of machines all around the world in this. So as soon as this was broken in 1997, they basically sent out a call for help. And in 2000, a new standard, the Roundel standard, which you're probably very familiar with that name, and that became AES, or the Advanced Encryption Standard. So, block ciphers pretty much make use of this construction. It's called a Feistel Network or a Feistel construction. DES uses 16 rounds of this. Now what happens is the message gets split into blocks of certain sizes, certain bit sizes, and each block then you cut it in half, and you only encrypt one half at a time through the rounds. So you'll see here, you take it here, pass it through your little encryption function, and XOR it with this half. You swap over, you do the same again, you swap over, you do the same again. And what that gives you then is a message which this block has been dependent on the encryption of this one, and this block is dependent on the encryption of that one, and so on. So that goes through 16 rounds. 16 times you do that. Different encryption standards will use different numbers of rounds. What's most interesting about this is it was proven that once you do 3 rounds, what you have done is taken a function which produces random output and made it invertible. Initially, a Feistel network was considered that it was all about taking just your plain text and enciphering it and not necessarily being able to get it back, so it was like a hashing function. But once you go through 3 rounds, it's proven to be efficiently invertible, and efficiently being kind of the key word. You work the process backwards, so using any pseudo-random function that is secure, you can create an efficient invertible construction. AES, again, uses a block cipher, but this time it's not the Feistel construction. AES, like I say, was created in 2000 by Mendels, Belgium. And that's still pretty much the system we use today. And it's still considered very good and pretty much unbreakable without an awful lot of effort and an awful lot of money, assuming it's implemented right. AES uses a construction a bit more like this, goes through 10 rounds. And again, you'll see that each block, as it's encrypted and XORed, depends, it affects the following. So you've got your small key, 16-byte key, goes through an expansion function, and those keys get fed in at each round for the XOR operation. And this time, you've got what are called S blocks. It's like a little lookup table almost of bytes, and each time you go through the round, the bytes shift across one place or shift around, and that XORing operation gets carried out each time. Side channel attacks are a little bit more interesting. So some of the ways that your encryption can be attacked, and this is very prevalent on hardware systems. Power attacks, by hooking a piece of hardware up to a little multimeter and watching the spikes on it, you can read those spikes like binary, where a spike is a 1 and a drop is a 0. And it's very, very simple then, and some poor implementations. I'm thinking memory cards, Sony memory cards, to read the encryption and see what's happening as that goes along. Sound is very similar. Sound just again being a wave form. You can actually listen almost to devices, hardware devices, and a sensitive enough meter will be able to read the binary 1s and 0s as they're going through. Timing attacks is a remarkably simple and very clever way of attacking a system. So let's say I issue a guest password to log into something, and that system has to perform certain operations. It might want to check a hash, or it might want to check the encryption and a hash. Depending on how long it takes and what way it's been encrypted, you can just keep pinging that system and measuring the length of time it takes to return an error. So if you get an error really quickly, that might mean you've got character 1 wrong. You run through the alphabet, all of a sudden it takes a little bit longer, right? You've got 1 character right, it's moving to the next character, and you can actually loop through that sort of system. If it's an insecure system, it allows you to just keep going at it and going at it and going at it thousands of times a minute. You can work your way through it until you've pretty much worked your way back through a whole string and guessed the password. Replay attacks is a wee bit more subtle, and it's kind of a man in the middle thing, so that could allow you to recreate a purchase online. If you're just eavesdropping on someone and you see a transaction and you hit that identical request, if the system at the other end isn't looking out for it, it could cause just a bit of malicious activity. ECB, electronic code book, we're getting on to more of the constructions, and you will see a lot of 3-letter acronyms. Hopefully will be a bit more relevant at the end of the PHP side of things. So this is what an image, famous Linux tux, looks like if he's encoded using electronic codebook mode. The ciphertext, in order to be secure, should tell you absolutely nothing about the plain text message, but you can see in this instance, we can pretty much see the outline of our countdown. Had it been done using CBC or another pseudo-random mode, you've got this garbled message. So as an encryption mechanism, electronic codebook isn't great. CBC, chain block ciphers. It's goes back to looking a little bit more like what we had with the AES system. You feed it an initialization vector with your plain text. You XOR it, you put it through your block cipher, you get this cipher text out. What you're calling out here gets fed in to the next block, so that the next block is dependent on the one before it. The next block changes, and you get a lot more randomness occurring there. Counter mode is a little bit different. It's still technically a block cipher, but you've got a counter that increments, and that counter gets fed in along with your nonce, or for all intents and purposes, your initialization vector here. And again, your action, but each block here happens independent, so there's no output here getting fed into the next block. And what that means is that you can effectively turn this into a stream cipher, because each one of these blocks could all be decrypted at the same time. Whereas in the previous instance, you had to do this one first, you had to do this one next, you had to do this one next. Whereas here, it can all happen simultaneously. So this can be a much faster system. However, there is an element of predictability in it, in that you know that this element is always going to increment by one each time. So it's a little less secure. 10%. Mix and max. I don't know why, but MIC is coming in as a frequently used term for what is essentially something here a MAC. Message authentication code. These are basically your hash functions. MD5, SHA-1, SHA-256. What they're all about is preventing tampering with your system. So they don't necessarily provide encryption or security, but they just let you know whether or not something's been tinkered with. Probably best to stick with SHA-256. So authenticated encryption. If you run it through, say, CBC mode, you're going to get your encryption, then you apply your MAC, your authentication code. Now this is where the likes of a timing attack can come in, because if you know that it's encrypted in a MAC, you're going to check that MAC. Well, the MAC doesn't match, someone's tampered with it and fire back an error. Well, if someone's running a timing attack, they'll know that. And for that reason then, when you do encounter any error, when you're checking any sort of hash functions or checking anything that's been encrypted, always introduce an element of randomness before you fire your error back. Just pause your execution code for a random amount of time, so that each time someone fires something that does generate an error, they have to wait an indeterminate length of time before they actually get that error back. And we're not talking about seconds here, you're talking just milliseconds. But make it different each time, just throw a random element in there. Then they learn nothing about the encryption. Doing a MAC first and then an encrypt is open to choose a cipher text attack. If you use random CBC or random counter mode, it's more secure. It's not open to the CCA attack, but it is still open to a padding attack. So key exchange, a bit more relevant and easier to think about for the likes of email and SSL. I tried to put this into a real world example. So let's say I have something that I want to give to you, I put it in a box and lock it, and I send it to you. Well, I've got the key to the lock, so you can't open it. So you put your lock on it and send it back to me. I take my lock off it, the box is still locked because your lock's on it, and I send it back to you. You have the key to your own lock, you open the box. So the whole time through transit, the box is safe, the box is secure, and no one can get into it. I couldn't get into it because your lock was on it, you couldn't get into it because mine was on it. But at the end, I managed to pass to you whatever my secret item was or my secret message. That's kind of how the key exchange system works. It's all about generating a handshake and getting shared locks going. This idea, this system, was dreamt up in 1973. A guy called Clifford Cox, whose name was spelled the unfortunate way and not with an X. And this guy worked for GCHQ in London, and GCHQ had been batting about the idea of we need this public-private key system, and he was tasked with it. The story goes he went home that night, figured it all out in his head, because working for GCHQ had made so secret, he wasn't allowed to write down the damn thing, and he had to remember it all night long and wake up in the morning still remembering the maths behind how this really works in practice to go into work the next day. So that was only declassified in the late 90s. Probably more famous would be the Diffie-Hellman construction, who it was invented around about the same time. So public-private keys. Public key is what gets used to encrypt. That's what, if you create a public key, you put it out there, anyone can download it, anyone can access it. And that means they can encrypt a message with your public key and send it to you. You decrypt it with your private key. Now, public keys use really large prime numbers, prime numbers that are 600 digits long or more. It's all about using a bit of clever maths, and I promise I wouldn't baffle you with all that on that my own brain. It's all about using the factors of the primes and the modulus of the primes, because trying to work out the factors of really big numbers is really, really difficult. You can get an awful lot of potential factors. So that's what makes the public key system quite hard to crack and easy to work with when you do know the two prime numbers at play. So this is a wee bit like our lockbox example, and this kind of explains how it works. Let's take Alice. Alice generates a list of public and private key pairs, and she sends that to Bob. Bob chooses one of the public keys, and then he chooses a random secret. It's going to be a number, 128 bits, and he sends this back to Alice. Alice uses her secret key to match up what one he chosen. So now she knows the secret key, he knows the public key. They now have this shared secret, which is Bob's random number, in which to encrypt the messages. The messages don't necessarily get encrypted with the keys here. The keys are used as a handshake process in order to generate a secret that we both know, and that secret's only allowed for that, generally speaking, for that session. So that's how the encryption is all about, the public-private key is all about generating this shared secret, and the shared secret becomes your key, which then goes through the key expansion process for actually encrypting your messages. So, last section now, we're just going to look at some of the PHP password storage methods. What are our options? Raw or plain text? No, nobody's doing that, right? I'm pretty sure, in fact I know, there are some systems, plenty of them probably, more than you'd like to think, that are still storing passwords in plain text. MySQL encrypt is not the best, it's a small hashing function. MD5, definitely not, its collisions are quite common on it. SHA and store and assault, interesting, it's reasonable option, it's an understandable option, but store and assault wouldn't necessarily be, it would be frowned upon now. A couple of years ago you'd have got away with that reasonably well. Bcrypt lets you create a good hash without store and assault. PHP Pass is a nice little wrapper for that, although John highlighted today that it's been mentioned in one of the horribly broken implementations. So a Mac hash, when you're storing a password, you don't need to get the password back. If you can ever click on a forgotten password link and that system sends you your password in an email, that's not a system you want to be using. All they should ever do is send you a reset password link because they don't know your password. The password should be stored as a hash. So hash hmax is a nice little function built into PHP for generating a hash. It can accept quite a number of algorithms. And here's an example. So you just specify your algorithm. We want SHA-256. You put in your key and you'll have a secret. Don't choose a simple little bit of text like my secret that's there, for example. The actual secret that you use here should be a hugely random number again, or a very random string, or a random bit of text. Just make it random, make it big. Crypt library, probably very small and hard to read, but there is a link. And again, this system, you don't have to store this all. You don't necessarily have to write these down, by the way. There's a link bundle, I'll give you one link with all the links that are relevant to that. So, create a salt. This isn't a secure salt. It's just an example of something a little random. Crypt your message, your algorithm here, the 2A, and this is your workload factor, so how many essentially how many rounds you want to encrypt it, and then your salt. Now what comes out, the hash that comes out contains information about the workload and about the algorithm and about the salt, so you don't need to store your salt anymore. It means you can just decrypt. As long as you pass in the hash, you'll be able to decrypt that. Or, sorry, not decrypt, compare. The PHP OpenSSL library, it's one that a lot of people don't mention when you look at a lot of cryptography and hashing functions. The OpenSSL library is fantastic. There's an awful lot going in there, probably a lot more than you'd ever need to look at. These are 4 of the functions that are probably most useful. Get cipher methods will tell you which algorithms are available to you on that particular computer or that particular server. A lot of the algorithms require an initialization vector, and those initialization vectors have different lengths, so you can use this function, tell it which algorithm, and it'll tell you how big your IV needs to be. And then you've got your encrypt and your decrypt functions. So the OpenSSL library is great for doing not just hashes, but two-way, symmetric, stuff that you need to decrypt. Maybe it's customer data, names, addresses, dates of birth, stuff that should be encrypted in the store, but that you do need to read out again in the future. So it does also have hash functions, but for hashing purposes, hash HMAC is probably a quicker, easier way to go. But I definitely recommend that you take a look at the PHP manual for the OpenSSL library. It's really good. The instructions in it are very clear, and it just gives you a bit more insight into what's possible and what you could be doing. PHP Pass for 5.4 minus. That's how you could implement PHP Pass. It's not really a recommended thing, and you should be always looking to up your PHP version to the latest version. The latest versions of PHP Faster are more lightweight, faster, and inherently more secure. But PHP Pass is available from OpenWall, and you can go and have a look at it. It is very easy to use, and if you're not sure on any way of implementing encryption and you don't want to look at OpenSSL, it's an easy system to use. It's a simple include, and you're basically just checking passwords or hashing passwords. PHP version 5.5, if anybody remembers the question in the quiz, implemented the native hashing algorithm, and it's again remarkably simple to use. Password hash, password verify, choose your algorithm and your password, and check your hash against your plain password. Very, very easy to use. It's essentially just a wrapper for crypt though. That's it. Credits to Skittledog for the picture of the Enigma machine. This URL here has links to pretty much everything I talked about tonight. So if you're anyway interested in getting a bit more info on encryption, there's loads of good articles in there. Some of them are Wikipedias, some of them are just PHP manual pages. But I definitely recommend you go have a look at them. Final thought. Bruce Schneier, very vocal in the world of encryption. Only amateurs attack machines, professionals attack humans. And if anybody read the Twitter shitstorm, GoDaddy essentially, with a little bit of social engineering, gave away someone's Twitter account, and it was held to ransom. So, people are more insecure than machines.